Council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today is Thursday, June 17, 2021, and we are convening this hearing virtually via Zoom. It's also being streamed live on YouTube, and the time is 9:18 a.m., and I'm calling to order this budget oversight hearing of the committee. Today marks the committee's fourth budget oversight hearing for fiscal year 2022 budget season. As I've said in our previous hearings that I think bears repeating, this is the second time the council will consider a budget under pandemic conditions. We convened last year's budget process in the shadow of a global pandemic that continues to ravage our nation and upend the lives of residents across the District of Columbia. The budget that we approve has to recognize that a lot of our lower income residents in communities of color across the District of Columbia have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, both the physical and mental health aspects, as well as the economic aspects of and consequences of the pandemic. The fiscal year 2022 proposed budget is $17.5 billion, and the local portion of the budget is $9.1 billion, with most of the growth coming from federal funds that must be spent over the next 4 years. For today's budget oversight hearing, we're going to hear from government witnesses only for two agencies. DC Lottery and Charitable Games will be first, and the next agency will be the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I don't see that we've been joined just yet by any of my colleagues on the committee or other council members, but if they join, they'll have 3 minutes to provide an opening statement, and we will do 7-minute rounds to question the government witnesses. Just as a reminder, I ask that all participants mute their microphones when they're not speaking. As I mentioned, the first agency that we're going to hear from is the DC Lottery and Charitable Games. DC Lottery regulates the sale of gaming products and charitable gaming activities in the District of Columbia. The proposed fiscal year 22 operating budget for DC Lottery is 7.3% increase over the approved fiscal year 2021 operating budget. Their proposed budget is funded entirely by the Lottery Administration Fund. The agency has budgeted for 88.5 FTEs, which is no change from the approved FY 2021 budget. With that, I'm going to turn to Ridgely Bennett, and you can begin your testimony whenever you're ready. Again, good morning to both you and Mr. Lindsay.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Ridgely Bennett, Interim Executive Director of the Office of Lottery and Gaming. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on OLG's fiscal year 2022 budget. Joining me today is my colleague, Craig Lindsay, Agency Fiscal Officer. The OLG's mission is to provide revenue-generating entertainment through the sale of innovative lottery products and promotions that directly benefit residents and contribute to the economic vitality of the District of Columbia, and to efficiently and effectively regulate sports wagering, game of skill machines, and charitable gaming in the district. Because the OLG relies heavily on non-district resident players to generate revenue, the COVID-19 public health emergency had a significant negative effect on lottery and sports wagering revenue. For example, there was minimal sports activity that occurred during the launch of Gambit DC, with all major sports leagues and most colleges and universities suspending sports activities. There was a significant reduction in the number of commuters coming into the district to work. There was also a significant reduction in tourists visiting the district. Restrictions placed inside licensed food and alcoholic beverage establishments and other social settings prevented OLG from moving forward with its retail-based sports wagering, and economic insecurity both actual and perceived, resulted in people spending less of their disposable income on entertainment activities in the district. While the COVID-19 public health emergency will continue to present challenges until the daytime population levels and economic activity in the district return to more normal levels, my team and I remain focused on recovery and opportunity. In December, the OLG launched a new iLottery platform, giving players located within the district the option and convenience of purchasing lottery tickets directly from the OLG website. Phase 1 of the iLottery project included Powerball, Mega Millions, and e-Instants as product offerings. Later this summer, we will add the OLG's number games, DC 3, 4, and 5, to the iLottery platform. In relation to traditional lottery, OLG has successfully launched the new lottery scratch games and promotions at retail to excite players, re-engage our small business partners, and excite tourists and visitors as they return to the district. OLG is also making changes to its sports wagering platform, including changes to its user interface and adding additional payment options, including PayPal. Most importantly, later this summer, OLG will launch retail-based sports wagering. Phase 1 of retail-based sports wagering will begin with 5 to 10 social setting locations, generally bars and restaurants. Licensed sports wagering lottery retailers will earn commissions on both sales and prize cashing. The OLG has issued 2 Class A sports wagering operator licenses. Additionally, we have issued 11 sports wagering supplier licenses and 58 sports wagering occupational licenses. The William Hill Sportsbook at Capital One Arena recently moved from its temporary location to its permanent location inside the area formerly occupied by the Green Turtle. William Hill is also operating a sports wagering mobile app within its 2-block exclusionary zone. As of May 31, 2021, William Hill has paid approximately $1.404 million in sports wagering taxes to the district during fiscal year 2021. BetMGM recently began operating its sports wagering mobile app within the Nationals Park 2-block exclusionary zone. BetMGM is expected to open its physical sports book at National Park later this summer. FanDuel recently submitted an application to the OLG to operate a sports book at Audi Field. That application is currently under review by the OLG. In addition to the Class A locations, OLG is reviewing 1 completed Class B operator license application, and that is Grand Central LLC, located at 2447 18th Street Northwest, and is waiting for a 2nd Class B operator license application to be completed, and that was submitted by 476K LLC for a sports book to be located at 476K Street Northwest. In addition to lottery and sports wagering, OLG is responsible for regulating game of skill machines and charitable gaming in the district. Game of skill machines are mechanical or electronic gaming devices that reward players with cash, a gift card, or a voucher that can be redeemed for cash. Game of skill machines are not gambling devices because the game outcome is based on the player's skill in playing the game rather than on chance or a random number generator. Game of skill machines can only be located in on-premise retail establishments licensed by the ABC board to sell alcoholic beverages. There is currently 1 approved game of skill machine operating in 11 licensed establishments. As COVID-19 restrictions are being lifted, OLG is seeing renewed interest from manufacturers and distributors in having their game of skill machines approved and licensed for use in the district. In May 2021, OLG adopted amendments to its 50-50 raffle rules to authorize the sale of 50-50 raffle tickets over the internet. 50-50 raffle tickets may be sold by qualified charitable organizations affiliated with a college or professional sports team. The rule amendments require that a geolocation system be used to ensure the sale of raffle tickets occur within the boundaries of the district. This is similar to the geolocation requirements for sports wagering and iLottery. As reflected in the District of Columbia's revised revenue estimates released on May 14th, 2021, OLG is projected to transfer for fiscal year 2021, which includes profit from traditional lottery games, game of skill, and sports wagering, is $44.1 million. As of May 31, 2021, lottery sales total $143.9 million as compared to $135.2 million in fiscal year 2020. This represents an 8.7 million or 6.43% year-over-year increase in lottery sales. As of May 31, 2021, fiscal year 2021 district operated sports wagering has generated $30 million in revenue, basically gross gaming revenue. Additionally, as of May 31, 2021, OLG has collected $886,000 in sports wagering license fees, a $346,000 or 64% year-over-year increase, and $10,300 in game of skill licensing fees for fiscal year 2021. As of May 31, 2021, OLG has transferred $31.45 million or 71% of its fiscal year 2021 goal to the general fund. With 4 months remaining in the current fiscal year, the OLG is cautiously optimistic it will meet the transfer projection. As reflected in the District of Columbia's May 14, 2021 revenue estimate, OLG's projected fiscal year 2022 transfer is $56.6 million. The OLG team is developing a strategic plan that grows sales and maximizes profit, but also remains keenly aware of the uncertainty surrounding timelines associated with the district's COVID-19 economic recovery, and by extension, the OLG's ability to generate revenue for the district. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I am happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you for your testimony. I do have a number of questions that I would like to ask. I'm not sure if you followed some of the oversight of the other agencies, but you'll probably recall performance oversight, where I began my questions with a question around racial equity. Mm-hmm. I've continued that practice with budget oversight hearings as well. And I'll just mention as a backdrop that as of June 15th, I don't think the numbers for yesterday have come out yet, but there have been a total positive COVID-19 residents totaling 49,223. Mm-hmm. And the total lives lost in the District of Columbia are 1,139, with 76% of those lives being Black residents, for a total of 866. I just wanted to provide that context, more so for listeners who might be watching the hearing, but then also to throw this question out to you. In your proposed FY22 budget, are there programs or allocations that are specifically designed to address racial or economic inequities faced by district residents? And in detail, could you describe, if any, how these efforts address those inequities?
So there's nothing specific in our budget. However, what we have done as an agency is to take the questions that you proposed during the oversight hearing, and we are incorporating those into our strategic planning sessions. So during our strategic planning, we are formally going to ask ourselves the following questions. In the context of OLG and its mission, what are the areas, programs, or initiatives where OLG sees the most opportunity to address racial and gender inequity? Are there any areas or programs where OLG has success in building racial or gender equality, over the past year, which areas or programs, consider one operational data point and one performance data point where the OLG collects race or gender information or could collect race or gender information. How can OLG data be used to inform future programmatic decisions? In regard to that question, we have already begun to change our applications to include optional, an optional area where people can provide race or gender information to us so we can obtain those data points.
Okay.
What are the two areas or programs where the OLG has significant potential to succeed in building racial or gender equality? Please elaborate on why you chose those two areas. So we'll go through that question and consider what racially and gender equitable lottery industry, what a racially and equitable lottery sports wagering industry would look like. What are three ways OLG's operations would reflect this achievement? So I think the best way that we can really incorporate these concepts into our agency operations is to address them directly during our strategic planning sessions so that they have an overarching influence on what we do.
Okay, and as you do answer those questions in your strategic planning sessions, we love for you to follow up with the committee and keep us apprised of how you're answering them and what, if any, additional things you all are doing to really weave in racial equity into the operations of the agency. So thank you for that response.
Yes.
According to your Schedule A, there are 9 vacancies in the agency. Talk about what steps you all are taking to fill the positions, and whether those, is that number still accurate?
The number may be accurate. There was one job offer that was recently made. I'm not sure of the current status of that, but we are actively recruiting for all of our vacancies. Of course, we are a relatively small office, and so every vacancy is very important to us. And so we'll be filling all of those as soon as possible. Okay.
What about vacancy savings for FY21 and any projected FY22 vacancy savings?
I'm going to ask Mr. Lindsay if he can help us with that response.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie. In reference to vacancy savings, we did experience a savings from the FY21 to 22. You may have seen in the budget chapter for the lottery from in FY22. So yes, we do expect to see some savings there. However, we still have enough in the budget to make the hires that we have in the vacancies and still be within budget.
What's the amounts though? I appreciate that you have enough, but what are the amounts of the savings for 22 and 21?
I think, like I said, from 21 to 22, I think there was about a $400,000 reduction. Of course, in terms of salaries, a portion of that was also made up of benefits. So that 400,000 is inclusive of salaries and benefits. In terms of 2022, I don't have the exact number in terms of the savings, but I can certainly get that for you.
Okay. All right. You have a sense of well, just if you could follow up.
Yeah, it's just because I want to give you the exact number. Okay.
Yeah. The agency's FY 2021 proposed budget increased by $295 million approximately, largely attributable to the additional sports wagering regulations activity.
Correct.
It's more than twice the FY20 budget.
Right.
You all allocated a net increase of $254,145,183, primarily in subsidies and transfers to support essential fiscal operations for funding, transfers, and payouts. Walk me through those changes and why we're seeing another, was it $37 million increase for FY 2022?
Sure. So we're an enterprise fund, so we're budgeted what our expected revenue intake to the city will be. Of course, with sports wagering and lottery, due to the COVID pandemic and the stay-at-home orders and restrictions on people coming into the district and restrictions on social settings, clearly over time that amount was reduced to what we currently see it. We do forecast, as the city reopens, additional people coming into the district and therefore additional revenue being generated by sports wagering and lottery operations. So we think that the current budget estimate is on track for where we will be for FY22. If you'd like more specifics, I'll ask Mr. Lindsay if he could add to that.
Yep, if I can jump in. And it also has to do with the timing of when we actually budget. So because we're budgeting the amount of time in advance that we do budget, we use those estimates that were built out back in 2019. So that's what you're going to see. Primarily, the increase is, I think it's about $30 million in the increase to revenue for sports betting, which is what primarily makes up that $37 million difference between.
Say that last part again, Mr. Lindsay, I'm sorry.
So yeah, so it's primarily a $37 million increase from 21 to 22, and $30 million of that is actually based off of the revenue from 21 to 22 for sports wagering. So that difference of $7 million is between 408 professional service or other things that go along with that increase in revenue, so supporting contracts and things of that nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Under table DC 04, this is page H45 in volume 4, the budget book, in case you need to reference it. The budget allocated for communications for fiscal year 22 is 1.1 million, which is, approximately $500,000 less than FY 21's budget. Explain why there's a significant decrease for this area.
Sure. The primary reason is because last year there was budget for the rebuild of the lottery's website. So the funding and the budgeting was included in that fiscal year, and that project has since been completed. So there was no need to have that amount built into 22.
Okay, and in the same table, marketing, it's $3.8 million more.
Correct. Yep.
Talk about that.
Sure. And the reason for that is because the marketing contract or advertising contract, which has gone out to bid, there was more scope of work added to the contract to go out for bid. So that's primarily due to the increase of projected or expected advertising services.
Okay.
And those changes were primarily made towards sports wagering.
Correct.
So that we can include those into the marketing contract.
That's right. Correct.
Yeah. All right. During our performance oversight, you'll recall that the regs were scheduled to come out in May for the lottery's retail operations of sports wagering. What's the status of that?
We are working on those now. Of course, in order to operate retail-based sports wagering, we had to have the city reopen, the restrictions lifted, so that we could bring people in. So for example, in licensed food establishments, until recently, you had to be seated to do certain activities, and that would not have allowed sports wagering to occur. Now that we have all the restrictions lifted, we're moving forward with promulgating the regulations for retail-based sports betting, and those should be coming out very shortly, within a week or so, if not sooner.
Okay, I was going to ask because I mean, you obviously needed to wait for the restrictions to be lifted to
Right.
really start kicking things off, but you didn't have to wait for the restrictions to be lifted in order to get the regs ready. Uh, are they essentially ready to be?
They are. We were still designing what the program would look like in a new district environment. And so what we've decided to do is to begin a phased approach where we start off with 5 to 10 social settings. Each retail location will have 3 to 5 kiosks in it where the sports wagering will occur. We're going to limit transactions to $600, and we're going to limit payout at those locations to $600. So anything over $600, you'll have to come to our lottery prize center to make a claim. So we're going to come out with a measured approach, and all those will be included in the regs.
Okay. Under attachment 1, actually, before I go there, let me what you just articulated about the 5 to 10 social setting locations. Are you all, when you roll that out, is that something that you intend to have permanently?
No, we are going to expand the number of locations. What we want to do is make sure that the program is operating the way it's supposed to, that our operating procedures are working properly. We are just completing the user acceptance testing on the systems and terminals to implement retail sports betting. So that those are about 99% done. And so we really just want to roll it out, make sure the program is operating effectively, and then we will be able to significantly expand the program.
Okay. And under attachment 1, CSG 41, it looks like you intend to procure a mobile vendor for FY22. Talk a little bit more about what this contract would entail.
So those are the lottery mobiles that are very popular in the city that we're able to move around the city, and people can come up and buy lottery tickets. We do many promotions in those. We're exploring the possibility of also including sports wagering as part of those, but it's a way to interact with the community. We generally look for a CBE vendor to help us out with that. So they're government vehicles. We have to drive the vehicles, but once they're in place, we'll have the CBE promotion team help with the sales and with the promotion of products.
Okay. And also in attachment 1, 2 more procurements targeted in FY22. Advertising services and games of skill monitoring system.
Correct.
Talk about both of those.
So the advertising services is what you asked about before. That's for our general advertising. In the past, that's been for lottery only. We've increased the scope to also include sports wagering. So that one's currently going through the procurement process. The game of skill monitoring system was a requirement of the game of skill machine statute. And what that does is it connects all of the game of skill machines located throughout the district to a central system so that we can monitor sales and effectively collect taxes on those sales. So what has been found in other jurisdictions is once that system is in place, the tax revenue for the jurisdiction significantly increases because the states have a better understanding of what's being sold.
I think you may have touched on games of skill in your testimony, but talk a little bit more, since we're on that topic, about what is the status of that, both the system and otherwise.
So the system is currently out for bid. So there's not much I can say about that. We do because these were originally being administered by ABRA. There are game of skill machines that have been approved in the district. There's been one, and they're currently operating in about 11 locations. And so once again, due to COVID restrictions, there was not a lot of interest during the time when the COVID emergency was going on. We are now getting a good number of phone calls from other manufacturers and distributors looking to have their machines approved and licensed in the district. So we expect an uptake in that. And of course, then for each retail location that they're located in, those locations will also have to be licensed.
Okay. So let me, I might be a little redundant here, but I want to make sure I understand where
Sure.
we are with games of skill. So there's one approved game of skill machine
Correct.
at 11 licensed establishments.
Correct. So it's that same model machine in 11 establishments.
Got it. Okay.
So think of it as playing Pac-Man, but you can win money as you play.
Got it. Got
And
it.
so the
So how
Pac-Man
many
machine-
actual licenses were issued?
So we've only issued one so far, and
Okay,
one
but
retail
so the
license.
establishments, their interactions are with the licensee
Correct.
of that one model.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so the only, with those transactions, the only entity that would be interacting with us is the person who got the one license.
Right. In general, we will license manufacturers of the machines, distributors of the machines, and the retail locations where they're located. That way we maintain control over what those machines are. We're not having them change from what's a game of skill to basically a game of chance.
Right.
So that's the purpose of that.
So the licenses to the retail establishments then
Mhm.
are licenses with the retail establishment owners or operators, or with the person who's licensed to
So that it's where the machines are being played, so that we can go in and make sure that the proper signage is up, that the machines are being operated according to law, that people are getting paid their winnings.
Mhm.
So it's to control all of that. The reason to license the manufacturers and distributors is to make sure that we have control over the machines themselves.
Mhm.
In general, in the way it works in every day, it's the distributor / manufacturer that really is running what's going on. They go in and contract with retail locations to place their machines in those locations. And so the majority of what's being done is through the distributor manufacturers.
Okay. And how many games of skill licenses do you anticipate issuing for FY22?
That's a hard number to pick right now because we don't have any applications in front of us, but I would imagine 3 to 5 new games. It may pick up significantly. We do have interest from retailers to having those machines because it's fun and exciting and something for clientele to do while they're in the establishments. So this could take off quite quickly, quite frankly.
Okay. Do you know how many, I don't know if you said this earlier, but how many different games are in Virginia or Maryland?
I don't know that right now. I can find that out for you, certainly.
Okay.
And their system is a little different. The district is unique in that you can win cash. In other jurisdictions, you generally don't win cash. You win some type of prize or a gift card or something like that. But we can get you the numbers for Maryland and Virginia.
Okay. Okay. So what I didn't see was anything in the budget that supports the agency's collaborative efforts with Department of Small and Local Business Development to train small businesses as sports wagering operators and management service providers. I remember during last year's budget oversight, you designated approximately $50,000 for those efforts. How much of any is going to go to that type of program for FY22?
Mr. Lindsay? And you're on mute.
Yeah, hold on. Let me take a look because it won't be specified, but we'll have it listed under the training comp object. I can tell you in 1 second.
Okay.
Take a look. So right now it looks like we have $25,000 budgeted there. That's in one department. We actually have it spread it out in multiple departments. So we have about $50,000 between two different divisions that would accommodate training for that.
Okay, all right. Can you talk about, Mr. Bennett, what kinds of things you all were able to do, or I mean, have you spent the money for this year on that aspect? CBD?
I'll have to ask Mr. Lindsay how much we spent. What we've been able to do is partner with the University of Nevada, Las Vegas to have several online classes where people can come and learn about the sports wagering business and how to get into the business. We've been very fortunate to have people from William Hill speak at that, a consultant who currently has her own consulting services, but prior to that, she worked for the American Gaming Association and Caesars in very high level positions. So we've had a number. I have to get the exact number that we've had, but we've been very successful in working with our partnership with UNLV to put on these programs.
Okay. Give me a sense overall on what the sort of level of participation of CBEs has been in sports wagering thus far.
Of course, their CBE plans have to be approved for the licenses, and those go through DSLDB. That requires 35%. What we're hoping to do is, as we open Class B locations, to have even more participation by CBEs. And of course, when we begin district operated retailer sports wagering, we might not be dealing with people who are certified CBEs, but we will be dealing with and licensing bars and restaurants in the district so that they can participate in sports wagering. And of course, as part of that participation, they'll earn a commission on sales. They have to be both a lottery retailer and a sports wagering retailer. So they'll get a commission on sales, about 5% on sports wagering, and a commission on cashing prizes, about a 1% cashing commission. So the idea is to bring small district-owned businesses into sports wagering.
Okay. How many, if any, joint ventures for CBEs have applied for licenses?
None currently. I'm trying to think. None currently have applied. I'll have to check on that. Of course, the licenses that we've issued are the two Class A's. Mm-hmm. That was William Hill, and that was not a joint venture, and BetMGM, and that was not a joint venture. But we do know that there are companies out there looking to form joint ventures. Mm-hmm. We've been in contact with them. So we know that that's coming down the pike. And I believe one person who's forming joint ventures testified at the public witness part of these hearings about his endeavors to operate sports wagering in the district. Yeah,
I recall that. The initial revenue forecast, and I know you talked about this in your testimony, but I want to sort of hone in on it for a moment. The initial revenue forecast for fiscal year 21 was $22.6 million. In March, you indicated it was going to be adjusted to $6.2 million,
right? Which is
nearly a 75% decrease.
Right.
Give me again the updates on what you expect the district to generate now for FY21.
Craig, can you give us the correct numbers for those, please? I have estimates, but I want to make sure we get you the exact numbers.
Are you looking for the exact number of where we look to wind up the fiscal year?
Yeah.
Right.
Overall, I think you mentioned earlier in your testimony that we have a $44.1 million transfer estimate, and that incorporates lottery and sports wagering. Overall, we do expect to meet that transfer goal. Currently, where we are as it relates to sports wagering is we're right around $230,000 in reference to transfer for sports wagering related activity.
So of the 44 million. Give me that number again. You're currently right now where?
In total, we're at $31.4 million in transfer.
Yeah.
Okay, our overall goal is 44.1. And then the breakout between lottery and sports wagering is 230,000 to
31 million.
31 million for lottery.
Got it. All right. So, and again, I might be a little redundant. I'm just making sure I have those numbers correct. The 44.1 total that you expect.
Right.
Of that, how much of that is for sports wagering?
227,000 approximately.
Well, of the 44.1, 6.2 is the projected for sports. So 6.2 for sports betting and 37 for lottery.
Okay. All right. So right now you're at 230,000, but you expect to get $6 million in the rest of this current fiscal year. Explain that, how that you're going to accomplish that.
Well, if I could, that $6.2 million was the projection when the original projections were redone. So that is what we started the fiscal year with as a projection.
Which is why I'm asking, I guess, a different question. I want to know whether, in looking at where you are currently, $230,000, there is a new projection with respect to how much you will take in for fiscal year 2021.
Right. Yes, and what I can say is you're right. The way we're trending, I can say right now it doesn't appear that we'll make 6.2 million based off of what we're actually doing at this moment. The transfer or the projection has not been adjusted to what we're actually doing currently.
So the 230 right now represents 3/4 of the year?
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
Just about, it's one month shy of 3/4. It's 8 months.
Okay, that's
right.
What's the monthly take then? I mean, we can round it up to what, 250, or would it be more than that?
Well, that number is cumulative. So if you're talking about what we're averaging a month, I mean, if we just take that 230, that 230 is cumulative of what we've done this fiscal year.
Right.
So if I project, even if we just annualize that out, I mean, very conservatively, we're still talking less than $500,000.
Okay.
So this fiscal year has been difficult for us because of the COVID restrictions.
Sure.
And we're looking forward to next fiscal year being able to significantly increase that once we get retail-based sports wagering up and operational, and as people return to the district. Because of course, in order to play our mobile app or participate in any of our games, you have to be physically within the district.
Right.
So we're hopeful.
So approximately about another, if you sort of use this trend, about another $115,000 for the rest of the fiscal year?
I think that's if we're being conservative, but if I can add also, you know, if we look at where we were cumulatively after 7 months and what we did this past month, that transfer amount, it increased by 200%.
Okay,
so
because the restrictions have been lifted as of June 11th, but even earlier, it was relaxed in May as well.
Thanks for that. And also with sports wagering, you have to overlay the events that are occurring. Things like the NBA playoffs get a lot of volume. When NFL begins, things like that are also important with sports wagering.
Okay. So we have been talking about FY21, our current fiscal year. Let me pivot to fiscal year 2022. The original forecast when we passed the law was $29.7 million. And I've got what's going on? Was $29.7 million in March. You indicated that the FY22 projection had been reduced to $20.4 million. Do you still anticipate those numbers for fiscal year 2022?
As we currently sit here, yes. Of course, a lot of this depends and will have to be adjusted based on the recovery from the COVID-19 restrictions, how fast people come back into the district, when government workers come back, when private workers come back, how tourism picks up. So just like the rest of the entertainment industry in the district, we're cautiously optimistic.
Okay, and in the statement that you provided, you indicated that as of May 31st, 2021, district operated sports wagering has generated $30 million in revenue.
That's the equivalent of gross gaming revenue.
Gross gaming revenue.
Right. So the number that Mr. Lindsay gave of
Reggie,
227 is really transfer.
Actually, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
That 30 million is actually NGR.
Yes.
Net.
What's NGR stand for?
That's the net gaming revenue.
Right.
Okay.
The gross gaming is about 31.3.
Okay. Got it.
So it's the reduction in promotional tickets and things like that.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
That's what the revenue is from sales.
Okay. And how much is the district paid out from sports wagering?
Let's see, 25.4 million.
I'm sorry, what is it, 25.4?
25.4 million.
And how much is the net, or how much do we take in terms of net revenue?
Right. So the net is 4.5.
Okay. So let me just make sure I have the numbers correct. Of the total 30+ million, we took in 4.5 million.
Correct. Yeah. Once you take out all your prizes. Yes.
Okay.
All your prizes.
Do we keep all that 4.5 million, or do we keep all that 4.5 million?
No, we do not.
Okay. So tell me where that 4.5 million goes and how much we actually put in our coffers.
So from that 4.5 million, we have to pay the contracted payment to the vendor, which is a percentage of the GGR. So that payment comes out of that. And then we also have to pay the direct administrative costs pertaining to the activity. That also comes out of that.
How much did that add up to of the 4.5 million?
I can tell you it's, let's see, in total 4.3.
Okay, so we pay out of the 4.5, we pay out 4.3 million, and we take in 200,000.
Correct, and that number correlates with that transfer amount of 230,000.
Right.
Okay.
So we do anticipate that some of our administrative costs will go down.
Correct.
Costs that were associated with the startup of a new product that we had to introduce to our players. And then some of our promotional dollars spent weren't necessarily proportional to the the sales that we were bringing in, and we expect that to correct over the next fiscal year. So you should see much better numbers next year.
Right.
Okay. All right, just making sure the note correct. So we should see much better numbers next year.
Correct.
Since we have to do some of the things that you just mentioned.
So the payout is always going to be high in sports wagering. It's generally in the 90%. We're paying out somewhere in the 80%. The contract rate is not going to change. So we're just making adjustments where we have the flexibility to do that.
Give me just a ballpark. I mean, this is taking me back. When I see what we ultimately took in after what the revenue is, and I will acknowledge what you mentioned about not having to do certain things again.
Right.
But yeah, it brings you back to the fact that Virginia is already moved forward, and I think they expanded. Maryland passed a bill that created what is it, 60 licenses?
50 or 60, one of the two.
Okay.
Mobile licenses.
Just give me a ballpark. If we had competitive mobile, we'd be taxing at what percentage?
If we had competitive mobile, as in the statute currently contemplates 20%.
20%, right? I mean, we'd have to generate a lot more than what we generated to date on the 4.5 million, correct?
Oh, by far. But it was you could not pick a worse time to introduce a new sports wagering product into the marketplace.
Well, let me ask you about that though, because William Hill introduced its product, right? And so what was their handle over the same period that we took in the 4.5? What was theirs?
I know their tax revenue was 1.044% million. And Craig, do you have their handle?
Yeah, let me look in a second, tell you in a second.
But while Craig is looking, William Hill was an established brand. So people knew what the brand was. They were willing to come. They were able to begin with retail-based sports wagering because they were able to use the concourse area of Capital One Arena, which wasn't under the same restrictions as licensed food or alcoholic beverage establishments. They were basically,
but it also meant that they had to come physically and stand in line, as I observed.
Right.
More than one occasion myself, just because I'd heard that this was happening. I went down just to check it out and see with my own eyes, and I saw people standing physically distanced in lines that wrapped around a corner in order to do this versus, doing it from the comfort of their own home or some place within the District of Columbia's borders via their mobile app. And so, a lot of people were betting or in other jurisdictions that have mobile, they were betting in that way, and they weren't here. And the fact that William Hill is an established brand, I'll give you that.
Right.
But does it not make, and I'm not trying to necessarily make a case for this, but it stands to reason though that if competitive mobile were in existence, you'd also have some established brands in that arena, which would probably give you, again, better returns.
I think we're premature in making final determinations because we have not had an opportunity to get our whole program up and running.
Well, I'm just following your logic though, Mr. Bennett.
No. I agree that people will come in. Cash is important when you do retail-based sports betting. You can make wagers. You can remain anonymous unless you win over a certain amount, or where people have to get tax information from you. With the sports betting app, you have to give a significant amount of information, including financial information, things like your Social Security number, because we have to be able to identify you for Bank Secrecy Act purposes, to identify you for to make sure you're over 18.
I understand that, but I think when my staff tells me some of the things that they're looking at, I've seen some articles about what's happening around the country.
Right.
people seem to be doing it in other places.
Well, other places, you have to remember that if I'm in Virginia, I'm still playing in my home state where we are dependent upon people coming into the district, where Virginia is not dependent on their population increasing during the day. So it's very, as a matter of fact, it helps Virginia or other jurisdiction because the people who would normally come into the district during the day, the commuters, are staying in Virginia. And so we've seen some of that for lottery sales also, that people are still playing. They're just playing in their home jurisdiction because they didn't have to come into the district.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have a larger population during the day pre-COVID, right. And we didn't see that, and that's one of the reasons why this committee focuses on trying to figure out ways to support our businesses, particularly those in our downtown core, those industries that have helped propel our economy over the years, hotel industry, restaurant industry, bringing conventions back. We definitely are focused on that. But I do see the trends in other jurisdictions, and it makes me wonder whether we've gone about this the right way. Mr. Lindsay, you're going to give us that number.
Yeah, it's not 92.3 million is what their handle is. And from that, they have a $14 million GGR.
Okay. Sometimes I should just write this stuff down. I try to type it. It takes me a little longer. So
we're happy to send it to you also.
We can send it.
Okay. So their handle was 92 million and their GGR was
14 million.
14 million. And just so I have the nomenclature right, 92 million handle for William Hill and Gambit's was exactly how much? That same
31.3. So William Hill 92.3, Gambit 31.3.
Right. Okay. Okay. So if we tax that at 20%, that would have been, let's see what I'm ballparking this, about 2.8 million.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Okay. Kind of jumped around my questions, so let me try to find where I was.
But you also have to take in consideration our goal is to engage district operated businesses to participate also. So we are DC focused, whereas some of the national brands will come in, they'll run a sports book, we will tax them and do well, but they don't have the same engagement with local businesses, and any profits they have leave the district. They go to different places. They're not DC based companies.
I appreciate that. That's a fair point. Thank you for mentioning it. I do want to ask, because the last time you testified during performance oversight, I think it was in March, you had mentioned that you were looking at the metrics, and you may have even said you were looking at them on a daily basis for demonstrating that Gambit's numbers were improving. I think you testified to. I want to hear a little bit more about the metrics specifically and how they have demonstrated an improvement in Gambit DC.
I'll let Mr. Lindsay talk about the specifics, but in general, you see an upward take in our handle, which of course translates into a general uptake in what we return to the district. But I'll let Mr. Lindsay talk about the specifics. And of course, once again, you have to, in general, the line is going up. There are ups, there are peaks and valleys depending on what sports are available to bet on. But we do look at it on a daily basis. We get a daily dashboard on both sports wagering and iLottery to talk about sales, to talk about what the payouts were, to talk about which games are performing the best, whether it's parlay bets or whether they're single bets, whether they're in-game bets or whether they're bets that were placed prior to the game. But I'll let Mr. Lindsay provide information about the general sales trend for Gambit DC.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the transfer, I mean, it's all predicated on not just what you take in revenue, but also what you put out in expenses. So what really drove, as I mentioned earlier, from the 7-month to the 8-month period, in 1 month alone, we experienced a 200% increase in the transfer amount. And that was primarily driven because of the expenses, the lack of expenses, I should say, that we actually had for the period of May. We've talked about this in previous hearings in terms of the cost, some of the costs, the more upfront costs. You know, the expectation is that some of these costs, as they dwindle, that also plays a role in actually what we're able to transfer. So we can't get out of that cost of the percentage that we pay to the vendor. That's a fixed cost. However, we can control some of the variable costs, like the expenses that go to support the activity. And that's what we saw from April to May. We saw a decline in that expense, which also allowed us to be able to increase the transfer. So there's several variables that will go into it. It's not driven solely by the amount that you take in. I mean, you can have a month where you have a high number of stakes or total stakes. However, it's all predicated on your payout as well. You can have an 81% payout 1 month. You can have an 86% payout another month. All that so it's not just those variables. You have to look at everything in concert to determine how much we're going to transfer and how successful it is. So it's just not able to just look at one thing.
Okay.
I think it's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step over you.
No, please.
I just think it's important to understand that, you know, the way that the legislation was set up was to bring in sports wagering in 2 different ways. One was to have national brands come in and operate at locations for people that chose those that wanted to do that. District operated sports wagering is designed to provide the profits of sports wagering to the District of Columbia. And so, you know, after we've paid our expenses, we're not taxed at a certain rate. Once we've paid our expenses, the whole amount that's left goes to transfer to the district. So what we believe will happen now that the city is opening up, now that sporting events are actually occurring, is that you'll see how that model will bring in a significantly greater revenue to the district than what the privately operated sports wagering will do. But once again, we'll have to see, but that's how the program is designed, and we're still confident in the model.
No, I am admittedly less confident than you are in the model. I got to tell you, but I don't claim to know or as much about this as you. But as I continue to delve deeply into this, and my staff who have spent a significant amount of time looking at Gambit, looking at William Hill, looking at Virginia, Maryland, looking at other places around the country. As I get that information from staff, I got to tell you, my confidence isn't growing. It isn't improving. Because I know that you had noted previously as well that Gambit's popularity was continuing to grow. And as the brand becomes more familiar and recognized in the market. Now, when you look at the numbers that y'all have online, I mean, since March, in fact, including March, it looks like Gambit's numbers are down in total number of wages and total amount wagered. And I understand these to be some of the lowest numbers we've seen with Gambit since it launched in previous May. And when you look at your metrics, how does that really compare? How are you looking at that? Because I see it and I'm concerned. I'm not growing in confidence when I see that kind of stuff.
No, I think that the numbers are important, but I think what's more important is we have not had an opportunity to fully implement the program. And so once we get people back into the city, once we engage the community with retail-based sports wagering, we are very confident that the numbers will turn around. And quite frankly, to some extent, and we realize this is a competition issue, but as people just become more familiar with sports wagering and how to do it, our model really is geared more towards the casual player than the experienced sports wagerer. So as people become more familiar with sports wagering, more comfortable with sports wagering, we think that it'll be a choice of entertainment that they will choose and that our numbers will increase. So we're aware of what the numbers are now, but I think it's really important to I can't highlight enough the fact that we really haven't been able to get the program fully implemented. So I think the numbers will have to show. Clearly, we'll have to show that once we implement it, the numbers are going up. There's no doubt about that.
Because even when you consider the app itself,
right?
You mentioned previously that the agency is continuing to work on improving it. I raised last time the poor ratings, right? You look at the most recent reviews some months later at the Apple store. In March, I think you mentioned the issues we're most complaining about were geofencing and funding a user's account. And funding certainly seems to be an issue, but it doesn't, I guess it's not the only issue. And Gambit DC continues to have was it 1.5 review on the Apple App Store?
Well, people who have issues will tend to complain, but I think a lot of the issues really are people not understanding that you really do have to turn on your location services on your phone because we have to identify where you are located. Funding Gambit DC is hard because we have to get so much information from people and it has to be correct information. So we need to be able to identify where people are. We think bringing on PayPal as a source of funding, something that a lot of people are very familiar with, will be of great assistance.
Have you done that, or when is that happening?
In the next month or so, where we are working with our vendor to get that up and running as soon as possible.
Anything else besides PayPal that you can do?
Well, we think once we open retail sports wagering, you'll be able to go to a location and pay with cash. And like I said, we're going to start off a little bit slow just to make sure that our procedures are in place and limit transactions to $600. But once the program is up and running, we'll probably increase those amounts. But many people prefer to pay with cash. The geofencing, it's the law. It's where the Shipstead Loose Act is situated. I was at my father's house in Northwest DC, and literally, if I'm in one part of his house, I can access the app. If I'm in another part of his house, I can't. So we do have a separate access to a separate application that will geolocate us to show us where the app is showing we are. But it's just how the Shipstead Loose Act goes up through the city. It's located where the boundaries of the district meet Montgomery County. And then when you put in the buffer zone that you have to put in to make sure that you're not operating illegally, there are some very complex areas of the district where, quite frankly, if we could tell people, take 10 steps to the left, you'll be able to bet. And that's not including the zones that are set aside for the Class A's, where you also cannot bet. So we're trying to find ways to educate people on geofencing.
So staying on the app for a moment, though, and transition from Apple, Because last time we talked, I remember you mentioned that the Gambit DC app is available on Android because
Right.
obviously everybody doesn't have an iPhone, so that's positive
Right.
that it is also on Android. I guess the issue though that I'd love to hear you
Mhm.
talk about a little bit is that it's not listed in the Google Play Store apparently, and I'm told from staff and others that the sports betting apps from other brands are.
So we're in the process of doing that. Until recently, gambling applications were not allowed in Google Play. They've changed their policies. The other apps are up. We are going through the process and waiting for approval from Google Play. So it will be available shortly.
Okay, you have a sense of how long that process takes and why we don't have it yet, others do? Like, so.
You have to upload a certain version of it that meets their requirements. So we have to make some adjustments. I'm hoping very soon. Unfortunately, it's something that Google controls and not us. But we hope that will happen very, very shortly.
Okay. I mentioned earlier just some of the stuff about the sort of regional competitiveness, and I know we've talked a little bit back and forth about Maryland and Virginia, but since we last spoke, they both had betting bills, right? That have been passed, and Virginia actually already had passed sports betting law, but they increased the number of mobile sports betting licenses this session, right?
They did, yes.
Okay. So what's the number of sports betting licenses permitted under both laws from Maryland and separately? What's the number in Virginia?
Right. I know in Maryland, like I said, it was 60.
Okay.
In Virginia, I can't remember the number that they have increased to, but there are a number of them, and so the major, what it boils down to is the major players are able to get licensed.
Okay, and those are just the two neighboring jurisdictions that are carved up to create the district, but there are obviously other jurisdictions that are in this market as well, I would think. West Virginia comes to mind, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Do you have the number? You know how many licenses they have? Are they comparable in terms of the number of licenses?
I would have to get you that information. We have a chart
Okay.
of legislation that shows, and we're happy to get you that.
Okay. So let me ask this, just in terms of how this works. I'm not a gambler, but if I have a mobile sports betting app from one of those states, and I travel here to the district, I can't use those apps to place a bet, correct?
It has to, the apps will know where you are. So if I have a BetMGM app, it will know either I'm in Virginia or I'm in the district. And depending on the vendor or the licensee, either it's a relatively seamless process to the player. But you may have to select, I'm located in the district or I'm located in Virginia. The app may know, but generally the advantage is that they have one registration process.
Okay,
so
but if I'm in DC, though, I have to use Gambit or go to one of the physical locations.
Correct.
Okay. Based on the reviews that we talked about and just Gambit's overall performance, how do you all at the agency expect visitors, whether tourists or commuters, as they start to come back to the district? We're putting resources as we speak. We're having these hearings about getting folks back. But how do you expect folks who are here, right? Residents, tourists, visitors, commuters, with other mobile sports betting apps to download Gambit to make bets here? I mean, give me a sense of your view of that.
So if you're in the district, unless you're within one of the exclusionary zones and you want to bet on a mobile app, then you have to use Gambit DC. Clearly we cannot control what people put down as reviews. However, our own research in talking to the players shows that people are generally satisfied with the app. They understand how to use it. as people become more familiar with the registration process. So I think, once all that is in place, our app essentially operates the same way as everybody else's app. You pull it up, you see what the events are, you see what the odds are, you place a wager. They all operate essentially the same. So we think that we are competitive with that. We don't think that ours is so significantly different that people wouldn't want to play. But so we think that, we are going to be competitive with that, with people playing. And as we get brand awareness, then I think that people.
But I almost feel like it's safe to say that the district is going to lose out on catching a significant amount of revenue for reasons that we've discussed already. And it doesn't seem like the district is as competitive with the odds either.
We are looking at the odds. Remember, our goal is to raise revenue for the district. So
I know we don't seem to be meeting that goal though.
But once again, we haven't gotten the program up and running. We are reviewing what is the best. It's basic business. It's selling a can of Coke. How much can I sell the can of Coke at to make the greatest profit? If I sell it for a penny, I'm losing money. If I sell it for 25 cents, I may be breaking even. If I sell it for 30 cents, I may be making a little bit of money. But if I sell it at 45 cents, I still have enough people playing to make a greater revenue for the company. It's the same with sports betting. What is the proper amount to set the odds at where people are interested in playing our game, knowing that there's competition and still generating revenue for the district? And so we are reviewing that right now. Currently, the contract has 80% else to pay out in it. That's adjustable. And we're looking to see whether or not that needs to be adjusted. We're paying out somewhere around 82, 83% now, maybe a little more.
Okay. When we enacted the sports wagering law, we required that a certain portion of the revenue from private sports wagering be dedicated to Department of Behavioral Health Gaming Addiction Fund. I'm sure you all recall, and the Neighborhood Safety and Engagement Fund is something that I champion being included. Councilmember Gray similarly wanted to make sure that we had a portion of it going to early childhood development. So after allocating 200 to the addiction fund, 50% of the remaining balance is supposed to go to each of the other two funds. As you are aware, early education and violence prevention are priorities, not just for this committee, but obviously the other committees that have jurisdiction, and the council as a whole, and the executive, frankly. The mayor has prioritized these things. According to the budget documents, though, the council is, it looks like there's $0 has been dedicated to either funds, the violence prevention or the childhood development fund, and neither are projected to be funded by private sports wagering until FY 2023. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Skipped around a bit, so give me a second to make sure I. In y'all's analysis of the jurisdictions, y'all do look at what the trends are in other places, right?
Yes.
And I asked about Maryland, Virginia, and some of the other jurisdictions that are near our market. I'd love to see, if you could, and following up with the committee on the numbers from West Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. I'd also love to see you all's information that you all have with respect to other jurisdictions around the country that have competitive mobile. I'm curious to see how they're doing and how they have been doing, frankly, during the pandemic. So if you could provide that, that would be helpful.
Most certainly.
And then let me also ask about background checks. What does it cost the district to perform background checks on potential licensees? I'm sorry.
It depends on the vendor or the applicant that's applying. To begin with, we were using a private company to help us do that. We've now given that over to our regulation and oversight employees. They're doing the majority of the background checks, but it really depends on the complexity of the organization. One of the issues that we've had is that, you start off with organization X, they're bought by organization Y. And so now you have a full new slate of qualifiers, as well as doing individual qualifiers, as well as doing the background on the new company. So
who bared the cost when you had the vendors doing the background checks?
So we do. It was to be taken out of for Class A, the $500,000 license fee. So what we are looking at is whether or not that fee is sufficient, or whether or not the license fee needs to be increased.
Okay, what made you transition from the way you were doing the background checks previously to bringing that? Sounds like you have it in-house now. It's being performed by staffers, or?
The majority of it is, and that is just bringing people on who are qualified to do it. We are very lucky to have a very experienced staff at Oversight and Regulation. They were able to work with the vendor that was doing them to get an understanding of the requirements of those background checks. And we feel very comfortable with the staff we have doing them to do the background checks. We do keep vendors on board in case we get backed up.
And is there a cost distinction between the background checks for Class A license applicants versus B or others?
It's not necessarily based on what kind of license you're going to get as an operator. It really goes to the complexity of the organization. We go through and we look at the organizational structure, and then we also look at the individuals associated with those structures. We determine who the individual qualifiers are going to be. Those are the individuals that we have to run background checks on. And it really, for large multinational corporations, those can be very complex with a large number of people. And we have those complexities associated with both A and B, quite frankly.
Okay, and if they are a person who applies, pays a fee, do the background, if they are denied the license, that's just money that essentially they lose as a part of the process.
Because we have already done the background. So before we take the license fee, we get the application in our system, we do a review of it, we have a meeting with the applicant, and we go over, these are the corporate entities we're going to do a background on, these are the individuals as individual qualifiers we're going to do a background on. And then once everybody sees everything, if people want to proceed, then we tell them your application fee has to be paid prior to us doing the full review of the application.
Okay. All right. I don't think I have anything else right now. There are a number of items I think you're going to follow up with the committee on. We look forward to getting your responses on that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before we transition to the next agency?
Not at this time, but thank you very much.
And thank you both for your testimony here this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Next, we're going to have the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, or OCFO, which is an independent agency in the district that assists the mayor and the council in enhancing the fiscal and financial stability, accountability, and integrity of the government of the District of Columbia. The OCFO's proposed FY 2022 operating budget is $199,672,803, which is a 0.4% increase over the approved fiscal year 2021 operating budget. The proposed operating budget supports 1,042 FTEs, which is a 1.4% increase from the approved fiscal year 2021 operating budget. The proposed FY22 capital budget for the agency is $31,194,397, which is a 133.1% increase from the FY21 approved capital budget. And the capital budget includes 38 FTEs, which is a 26.9% decrease from the approved fiscal year 2021 capital budget. I see that Dr. Fitzroy Lee is already with us. And so I'm going to turn to you for your statement, and I'm going to say good morning to you. I appreciate you being here. I don't know if there's anybody else on your team. I do see some other folks. Okay.
Yes, there's several. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
And you can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Right. So I'm going to share my screen because it's in the form of a presentation. So let me go ahead. Okay. Okay, I think, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Fitzroy Lee, Interim Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia. I am pleased to appear before you today to discuss the fiscal year 2022 budget request for the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. The OCFO's fiscal year 2022 budget request supports the agency's strategic plan. With me are several of my colleagues, and we are available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. I will now discuss the budget in greater detail. So the first here, I just wanted to review the core functions of the Chief Financial Officer's office. So as you know, the independent Office of the Chief Financial Officer certified that budgets are balanced and financial statements are fairly represented, provides independent revenue estimate, monitors the revenues and spending, evaluate fiscal impact of all legislation, reviews economic development project, issues debt, manages all our investment, and oversee credit ratings. We also oversee the tax collections and the lottery. And we manage the financial personnel who execute the budget, accounting, and payroll functions in all agencies. Next, I just wanted to highlight here a few of the outputs that we have had. And what I want to emphasize here is that last year, as you know, was unprecedented. It was a year of 100-year pandemic, and we shut most places down, and most people were working from home. But what I want to emphasize that didn't diminish the output for the CFO. So just to highlight a few of the outputs, we processed over 1 million tax returns, issued over 300,000 refunds, answered almost 350,000 calls. We also did over 13,000 in property tax appeals at the first level, and collected over 152 million in delinquent payments. We also processed over 5 million electronic payments, collected over 36 million in CCU debt, and we've been managed almost 5 billion in fiduciary programs. This includes OPEB, our 401A, 457B programs, and we issued 42,000 W-2s, and we were still doing fiscal impact statements, and we did over 160,000 of those. 160 of those, sorry. So here I wanted to go into our budget. So we are requesting almost 200 million in our operating budget to support just over 1,000 FTEs. And that's split between 76 million in non-personal services and 124 million roughly in personal services. So here are the highlights of that 200 million, roughly 200 million budget. We're requesting about 145 million in local funds and federal grant funds of about 450,000 to manage the electronic benefits transfer. These are costs we manage on behalf of the Department of Human Services. We're requesting about 9.2 million in intra-district funds. These are funds paid to us for programs that we manage on behalf of other agencies, such as health benefits fees, single audit, cashier services, and nursing home tax administration. And we're also requesting about 46 million in special purpose revenue, mainly to administer the Central Collections Fund, tax collection fees, bank fees, and unclaimed properties. These are the major changes, the changes that we're making in our budget this year. So we're realizing $2.7 million in savings from merchant fees, and we'll use that savings to create 8 FTEs and fund some NPS needs. Of that, about 2.4 million will go to support our new district integrated financial system, also known as DIFS. And those resources are needed because as we get closer to implementation, we're setting up a center of excellence, which will support the system in the post-implementation. And so we're requesting 5 FTEs as part of that. In addition, we'll have 1.5 million for specialized technical support. We're also requesting 347,000 to support 3 FTEs in budget and planning, human resources, and contracts. And then on the increases, so these are reallocation of the savings. On the increases portion, we have 364,000 to support 5 FTEs, 4 in budget and planning, 1 in treasury, and those are to help managing monitor the use of the ARPA funds to make sure that we're using them and accounting for them properly. And then we're requesting 1 FTE for special purpose revenue, and we're requesting 182,000 for that to support operations in the unclaimed property areas. Moving on to discuss some of the ongoing and new initiatives for fiscal year 2022. As you know, Mr. Chairman, we have just implemented last November our modernized real property tax system. We are calling MRPTS as a conclusion to integrating and modernizing all the tax systems, the tax collection systems in the OTR. With the completion of the modernized real property tax system, we can say that we're the only jurisdiction in the country that has integrated all our tax collection tax types into one system. As a result of that, we are having major change management effort within OTR, and this is to ensure that once the systems that we have in place, we're using them efficiently to execute our tax administration function. And a lot of the emphasis here will be on the compliance administration as well as audit and criminal investigation, because with the system and I'll talk about this a little more later on, we now have data and analytics that will enable to do more selective audits and to concentrate those in places where we will realize the maximum return from our audits. I mentioned before that we're developing a center of excellence, and the center of excellence will support both the new integrated tax system as well as the new financial system that we're in the process of implementing right now. And, with the development of the Center of Excellence, it will ensure that, not just that implementation, but throughout the life of that system, it will remain best in class. It will develop the appropriate investment in training for the staff to keep them current and as new employees come in. And it will also help to support the integration of the new financial system with all our other systems, including the integrated tax system. I mentioned earlier that a part of the reorganization in OTR is to take advantage of the new system. And as part of that, now that we have an integrated system and the data that supports that, we're developing artificial intelligence pilot project. And that simply means that we're going to be using analytics for audit selection and also to screen a tax refund using what we're calling the questionable refund detection team. It's a QRDT, and various other applications like that we will be rolling out over the next several years. And as you can recall, Mr. Chairman, as we were implementing the real property tax system, which came right about the time when we also were in the middle of the tax season, our systems were inundated with the call volumes went way higher than we had expected. So one of our response to that is that we're currently drafting an RFP to have a customer contact center overflow vendor that we would be able to draw on when the call volumes are highest to make sure we can react very quickly to those calls. And we're also, on that line, we're also about to award a contract for the implementation of a modernized telephony system, which would offer additional communication channels and greater support to customers. One component of the district integrated financial system is that for the finance and treasury. And we've already implemented phase 1 of that system through what we're calling a Kyriba treasury management system. And with implementation of that, it will offer operational efficiencies and scalabilities through the implementation of a bank connectivity / data hub that will support cash positioning, cash accounting, treasury payments, and bank account management. Some of the additional benefits that we'll get when we finally implement this integrated financial system is that, first of all, we're replacing a really old technology, which is the SOAR, this current accounting system. And with the replacement of that, we will have a system that is very modern. And so part of doing that, it's a really massive job, is that we had to set up a project team and have resources dedicated to that. So we have a dedicated projects team. We've hired Deloitte Consulting for the system implementation and the organizational change management that will be required for that. And we've also contracted with an independent verification and validation team from Gartner. And the purpose of that team is to, as the project as we operate a project and implement that project, they will identify risk before they materialize, so we can take the necessary action to prevent those risks from hampering the successful implementation of the program, of the project. We mentioned already that phase 1 of the treasury management is complete, and the financial and budget system will roll out in phases. We have requested $205 million over 5 years for this system, and we have $26 million that was removed from the project by the council. And if we don't have that restored, it will prevent us from implementing the budget formulation system. Some of the benefits is listed here. So we'll have improved reliability, better reporting and analytics, improved controls for compliance, better decision making, less duplication of effort, improved customer service, better improved productivity and efficiency. It will reduce our maintenance costs since we are replacing a much older system. And we'll have the ability to integrate with other systems. And one of the other benefits is that right now there are many other shadow systems and databases and spreadsheets that are helped to support because of the current system is very old. We'll be able to eliminate all of those or most of those with implementation of this system. The other thing we're doing is we're implementing we're assisting the housing authority with reviewing all their assets and surveying their assets and looking at how we can determine the funding that will be required to get the public housing to a state of good repair. This is something we did for the district and what we're doing for the and what we've also done for WMATA. We also have an ongoing enterprise risk management initiative, which what it will do is allow us to identify, assess, and effectively manage a risk across the entire agency. It involves looking at those risks, prioritizing them, and these risks cover operational, financial, and strategic risk. And as you know, nowadays cyber risk is one of the things that is prevailing throughout the world, frankly. And so ongoing monitoring of these risks and seeing how we can monitor them is the best way forward. And we also, as you know, over the last year have done a culture initiative around our smarter culture and values, and we're continuing to implement that. Over the last 2 years, we have put that as part of our performance management system, and we use that as part of our evaluation. We've also managerial certification program to emphasize this at the managerial level, and we have a smarter awards program. Culture, we have done since the pandemics 2 now culture survey, which is to evaluate how employees are receiving the smarter culture. And finally, as we get to the end of the pandemic, we're developing a post-pandemic remote work plan, which will take into account it will be with the input of employees. And we just completed a survey of the employees, both on how they have been faring and their attitudes towards remote returning as the pandemic ends. And as with all things, we are going to be emphasizing the safety of our employees first and making sure that as they come back, they will feel safe. And with that, that brings me to the end of the my presentation. And, my colleagues and I, as I said, are available for questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I do have some questions. I may have a couple about the presentation specifically, but I touched on a number of things that you mentioned in the presentation in my prepared questions. So thank you for that. As I did during the performance oversight earlier this year, I'll do again and start off with a question around racial equity. And it's the same question that I've asked of every agency that's appeared before the committee for budget oversight during this budget process. Are there specific initiatives or allocations in your office's proposed fiscal year 2022 budget that are designed to address racial or economic inequities faced by district residents? Please describe what these efforts are and how they address these inequities.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. As you said, you did ask this question at our oversight hearing, and we've actually anticipated this question, and so there are several things that we're doing at this time. So the Office of the Chief Financial Officer has developed and will launch before the end of this fiscal year a diversity and inclusion program that will increase cultural awareness and understanding. The program will comprise of web-based training to raise the awareness.
Your video is still off. I don't know if you intended to turn it on, but it's still off. Just FYI. I don't mean to interrupt your answer, but
okay.
Turn my attention.
Okay, I think it was turned off when I did the.
Yeah.
Is it back on? Okay.
It is.
It's on. Sorry.
Again,
yes. So I was saying that. Sure. So we had several programs. We have as I mentioned, diversity and inclusion program, which will consist of web-based training to raise awareness of the benefits of an inclusive culture, treating everyone with respect, becoming aware of unconscious biases, understanding and recognizing those and addressing those unconscious biases. We'll have a quarterly speaker series that will discuss such topics as value of diversity, inclusion in the workplace, eliminating personal biases. We're planning to have coffee conversation hosted by our HR office to discuss relevant topics and to share how employees have put those training techniques to use to improve the daily interactions in the workplace. In OTR, we also have several initiatives, and as you mentioned earlier, over the past year, the effects, because of the financial effects of the pandemic, OTR has worked to ensure that vulnerable taxpayers are not left behind, and they have some very specific initiatives that they're undertaking. Those initiatives include having a more flexible payment plans, and this includes extending the terms of automated system payment plans and reducing the penalties on payment plans for the taxpayers facing hardships. Taxpayers now have the ability to set up self-service installment agreement using the new flexible new and flexible terms on the OTR website. OTR is working to ensure that notices are written in plain language and to translate notices on our website into Spanish, including emergency COVID guidance. And OTR will continue to translate these important information into other languages as well. OTR has partnered with the Mayor's Office of Latino Affairs in order to improve our language access and bridge any communication gaps with our immigrant communities. In addition, we have now the DC Taxpayer Bill of Rights and brochure has been published on our website in Spanish. OTR also has been working closely with partner organizations that focus their outreach on vulnerable population. Organizations such as the Capital Area Asset Builders, DC Kin Care Alliance, AARP, and other organizations like that. And these outreaches to encourage all eligible taxpayers to claim their earned income tax credit. And OTR has partners also with DC ARP and the Legal Counsel for the elderly to improve DC services to the senior population as it relates to the Schedule H. And we have quarterly meetings. We hold quarterly meetings to discuss improvements to the forms and instruction, as well as communications to ensure that applicable seniors are receiving the credit. So those are just some of the programs, and as always, we're continuing to assess, how we're performing in this area and working to improve things as we to always improve the way we respond to racial equity.
Thanks for the response. Two things stood out. You mentioned about the self-service, I think, payment plans. I'm going to ask you some questions about that a little farther
Sure.
down in my prepared questions. But also you mentioned Schedule H, EITC, and some of the things you're doing, working with different organizations to my daughter is washing her dishes, making a lot of noise with the spray gun. You mentioned EITC, you mentioned Schedule H. How long have you been working with those various organizations? I think that's very important, and I'd be curious as whether or not you all have any data about whether you're seeing more people claim those benefits as a result of the work that you're doing with the organizations that are already engaged with these populations. Is it too early to say, or do you already have some feedback and some information about how that's going?
I will turn to Keith Richardson, the Director of Tax Administration, for that. But what I'll say is that almost from the beginning, we have been working, at the beginning of the EITC, we've been working on outreach. So that has been longstanding. And, you know, I can't remember all the figures, but I know in the first year we had more of an impact, but I think as we've gone along, it hasn't had as much impact in terms of increasing substantially the number of applications. But I'll turn to Keith to add to that.
Good morning, Councilmember McDuffie. To answer your question, we've been partnering with these organizations for the last several years. Over the last couple of years, CAB has been hosting a EITC workshop. So we come out to speak, do a presentation during that workshop to make sure that their partners and the people in the community are aware that we want to continue to be in assistance and to recognize that the district does about 40% more than above on the EITC tax credit. We continue to work with AARP and their organizations, quarterly meeting, as Dr. Lee said, on Schedule H, because we want to make sure that every resident in the district that qualifies for Schedule H has an opportunity and will apply for that as well. So we have seen an increase in people applying for both credits. We continue to see it. Right now, we don't have the results of this tax season, but when we have that, we can make sure we can share information with you.
Okay, thank you for that. The agency's proposed operating budget for FY22 includes an additional 14 FTEs. Talk about the role of these positions and the need to fund 14 new FTEs.
So on my presentation, I mentioned that more than half of those are FTEs that will go towards supporting the integrated financial system. So where we are now, as I mentioned that part of what we will do in the post-implementation is to create a center of excellence. And the center of excellence is a unit that will, once the system is implemented, the center of excellence will help to make sure that the system continue to meet the needs and remain a best in class. And as we're in the middle of implementing that, the integrated financial system, we recognize that there will be need for that support starting just before we go into post-implementation. And so that's 8 of the FTEs. We also have 3 FTEs that will be additional support in budget and planning, human resources, and contracts. And then we have 5 FTEs that, as I mentioned in the presentation again, is for support with ARPA, accounting and making sure that the ARPA funds are accounted for and follow the federal guidelines. And then we have one FTE that is to support operations in our unclaimed property area.
Unclaimed property area. I know have a question about that a little bit further down, but I may just want to ask it now. When you mention unclaimed property, talk specifically about the types of things that are included in unclaimed property. And let me find the question first. So there's a subtitle. I think it's 7A of the mayor's BSA is the Revised Uniform Unclaimed Property Act of 2021, which changes requirements for how some unclaimed property must be managed by the district. Can you talk specifically about that subtitle and give listeners a sense of what types of things are included in unclaimed property and why these changes are needed?
So I will turn to Lynn is on for going into more details on that. But generally, the gist of it, it's various changes that we're making to the unclaimed property, and there is a revenue component to it, and that component comes from the fact that with these changes, it will allow us to to liquidate certain assets more quickly and recognize that revenue as part of our budget. But there are various other administrative changes that will be a part of it. Lynn will talk some more about those administrative changes. Lynn, she's one of the key person that's doing this in the Office of Finance and Treasury. Lynn?
Good morning, Councilman McDuffie.
Good morning.
There's a lot of changes in this statute that would allow for additional property types. The Unclaimed Property Act, as it stands now, is from 1981. So since then, there's been a lot of added property, and recently cryptocurrency, stored value cards, a lot of electronic property that wasn't currently under the statute that we're adding to the statute. So there's going to be a significant number of cash that's going to be coming in, resulting from all of these new property types. It'll also allow us to, as Mr. Fitzroy mentioned, Mr. Lee mentioned, was that we're going to be able to sell our securities, currently hold our securities for 3 years and 3 months. Statute requires us to hold them for 3 years, but we added 3 months just because of time variances there. The new statute will allow us to sell them after 60 days. And that will then allow us to cut back on some of the back office costs because we have to post all of the stock splits, the mergers, dividends. And that is a lot of costs that we have to incur by posting those. The owners will still be entitled to their property. It just will be in the form of cash, but they'll still be entitled to it. Another one of the areas in unclaimed property that's going to change is that from those stock sales, we'll be able to generate 1099s on the capital gains and even the dividends that aren't currently being processed. So by the sale of those stocks, we will be able to start generating 1099s. Another part of the statute that will change is that it also allows us to offset the district's debt. So we'll be able to use unclaimed property funds for CCU, tax liabilities, and even child support. So, once we get it imposed, and we'll be able to start working with those agencies to use unclaimed property to pay down those parts of those debts. Another area is that our third-party contractors, right now, there is no real cap on what they can charge for doing audits for the district. It will cap them at 10%. So that way they'll all be on the same level field. I think the highest that we have right now is just 12.5%. And that's monies that are coming in from audits, from companies that should be reporting to us, and that we pay on what is received. And only what is received. There is no estimate or anything like that. We only pay on what money is received from those companies, but it'll cap at 10%. Another part of that is that the life insurance companies have for years had not been turning over some property based on death master files. So we have worked with the National Association, and I want to make sure I say this right. I apologize. I have
No
it.
worries. No worries.
Now I just make sure I say this right. The National Council of Insurance Legislators, to ensure that we're following the same thing, the same policy that they're following, that insurance companies should be researching and managing death master files to see if insurance owners have been deceased. And that way, if they find that record, they'll be turning that property over to the district. Currently, we've been getting a lot in for the last few years, but we've never had a policy in place. It's just been a policy, not an actual statute that would cover it. And so we have gotten some pushback, but most holders of insurance policies have been remitting those funds, but this will then put it in place in part of the statute. We also have imposed we have a penalties and interest provision already in the statute, not been imposing it, but we have it ready to go because we were trying to get more and more companies in compliance, rather than imposing penalties and interest. So we have that ready to go. We've been working with our vendor to get that in place. So that's another part of it where we can assess penalties and interest on holders that report late or unwilling to file. I think that, one of the other things is one of our cost reducers is going to be our publication. We have our information out on the website. And we have a national website that we use to publish our names. It'll eliminate the cost of publishing those newspapers. We don't generate a lot of calls from those newspapers. And what we are saying we're going to do is we've offered to do a quarterly insert. So it will give someone who gets a newspaper a chance to call into our office and check for unclaimed property. And there'll also be a little submission form if they want to check. So we'll eliminate the paper publication, but we won't of the names, but we won't eliminate the actual public notice. So owners still will be able to call us or go online, or if they don't have access to that and they just have a newspaper, they can fill out a form and send it to our office and we'll research it.
Okay, so pretty significant changes included in this subtitle. What's the amount that is anticipated specifically for unclaimed property in FY22?
Okay. So it looks like in FY22, we would increase by 24.7 million. And most of that would be from the sale of securities. Currently, we're holding over 20 some million dollars in securities. And then every year we get annually, it's about $5 to $6 million in. So if the bulk of what's out there, if we sold it in 2022, would generate at least $15 to $18 million in revenue right off the bat. And I say revenue, it's really cash. It's coming in, but bottom line is it's still owners are still entitled to it, but we do have use of that money. So that's part of it. Then
and I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, so those are the gross revenues, but in terms of what's returned to the district, it will be about $7 million.
7 million
in 2022.
Yes, sir.
To the district coffers.
How much in 21?
I think these changes are planned for 2022.
No, I get that, but I guess I'm thinking how much for unclaimed property is in the budget.
Total unclaimed. So you're talking about total unclaimed property.
Yeah.
I can get that figure.
Okay, and then
I can get that figure for you.
If you could, Dr. Lee, just again, how much do you anticipate? The gross revenue was what amount, and then how much do you anticipate going to district coffers?
So I think Glenn said it was 24 million in the gross revenues in terms from the sales.
And then actual revenues. And we were saying the actual revenues are going to come from the penalties and interest on our holder reports. It's also going to be on the capital gains from 1099s. So those are actual revenues coming into the district. And also, we don't have in place now, we don't know what the figure would be if we used the unclaimed property to offset the debt that's owed to the district. So there, that's generating a lot more money into the district itself, that we can't see the value of that at this point because we don't know what matches we can do. But we would think that we would be able to pay down a lot of debt for, tickets and child support and things like that, that we're not currently able to do. But I don't have a figure on that because we've not done any matching programs or anything like that at this point. As far as cost reductions, we're talking about $100,000 a year savings on our brokerage services, because if we're selling stocks and securities within 60 days, we wouldn't have the monthly maintenance fees for those securities. So right now, if we're holding them 3 years, they are charging us a monthly maintenance fee on all those securities. So by reducing that and selling in 60 days, that would we think would eliminate at least $100,000. Again, in the publication, we will eliminate $20,000.
Okay.
And Chairman, just to come back to sorry for talking over you. There 22 million we're expecting total in unclaimed property for 2021.
Okay, and where do the funds from unclaimed properties go? Is it to the general fund or someplace else?
Yes, it is part of our local fund.
Got it.
Yeah,
right.
it's covered under non-tax revenue, and it's a component of our local funds budget.
Okay. And so, let me tie it back to why I started down this path to begin with. Right. You mentioned the unclaimed property position. And so what is the new property program advisor going to do? And is that the position that you mentioned in response to my question about the FTEs?
Right. And I just want to separate those two. So these initiatives that we're and the changes that we're making are separate from the FTE. We're requesting the FTE because what we saw over the past year is that there was need for more personnel in terms of the operations there. And so that is separate from the additional revenue that we'll realize from the changes in the legislation. But I can turn to Lynn, who will tell us what the additional FTE would do.
Yes, there's a lot of programs that we've been working on. A few years ago, we implemented a new updated unclaimed property system, and it allows us to have our claimants come to us directly through the portal and make claims and make payments faster. We can automatically go in there. It was time consuming, but the new system has set up that where the claimants can even come to us and say, okay, what's the status of my claim? So there's been a lot of improvements made. We also know that we are looking at new programs as far as, things that are going to be done in the unit as a whole. To be able to generate these funds. There's going to be a lot of new programs starting in the next couple of years if the bill goes through, that's going to generate the 1099 processes and the penalties and interest. So we know that we're going to need someone on board to not only help with grabbing the statistics and doing the data and doing the analysis on all this data and coordinating it with the other states to see, okay, what have other states done in these programs? How have they handled projects like this? So we want to make sure that someone's on board to be able to take that and work with that position to get all these programs at I want to say the top level. And I think by bringing this in a new person to analyze the data, to scrub the data, to work with the other states, that will improve the processes overall. And it will also coordinate what we're currently doing with the new programs that we anticipate to come in place in the next year. Okay.
And so let me, I appreciate that explanation. I'm gonna go back up to just the vacancies. And so I'm clear, how many vacancies do you currently have?
let me turn to Paul Lundquist, who will answer that question.
Yes, we have 79 vacancies across the agency. 55 of those are local fund vacancies.
Okay, and how much in vacancy savings?
Well, actually, those 55 represent just over 6% of our local fund FTE authorized total. And that's just over the lapse rate that we have for the agency. So we are operating very close to our budgeted amount of dollars for our PS. When we saw you back in March, we had 50 local fund vacancies. And at that time, we were actually running a small deficit in our PS funding, just going straight line. And so we've added a few more vacancies. There's ebb and flow throughout the year. But right this year, we're operating very close to our budgeted PS level.
Okay. How many vacancies do you all typically run annually?
Well, we budget at around the 5%. This FY21, our budgeted lapse rate is 5.6%, meaning that's the percentage of vacancies that we will need to have on average to stay within our PS budget. Next year, our budgeted lapse rate has dropped below 5%.
What is the percent for next year?
So that would be, it is 4.6 for local. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What kinds of things are included in the non-local FTEs? You said it was about 55, I think, local. 55
local, 24 non-local. The majority of those are in Treasury right now. And the majority of Treasury's non-local vacancies are in the cashiers and customer service representatives. And I think coming out of the pandemic, they're taking another look at how to staff those functions moving forward. So I think there's been a pause in the cashier hiring right now.
Okay. See where the budget chapter for the agency says that it includes a $230,000 adjustment in the tax administration program to line the budget with projected revenues from the Emory Beacon of Light tax abatement, which is included in the mayor's BSA. Elaborate on that, if you will.
Could you repeat what's the question?
But I observed this $230,000 adjustment in the tax administration program to align the budget with projected revenues from the Emory Beacon of Light tax abatement.
Keith, can you take that one?
The adjustment is a $230,000 adjustment
in this OCFO's budget.
Yep.
I know that's dealing with I think a tax abatement for a nonprofit organization in the district. I don't remember all the particulars to it off the top of my head right now, but I can respond back to you with that information.
Okay. Okay, yeah, if you would. The executive summary for your budget says that and this is proposed FY22, says that the Office of Tax and Revenue will be ramping up compliance initiatives. Talk about how you're going to be ramping up compliance initiatives, and if you could give me a little detail around that and how it's reflected in your budget in terms of any increased revenues associated with that effort? Or
Sure. And, I'll start, and, if you have follow-up question, I can turn to Keith Richardson, the director, to talk. So it's several different enforcement initiatives. And, as I mentioned in my testimony, because we have now fully implemented our integrated tax system from, income, property, sales, what it allows us to do is generate analytics that allows us to more fully target our audits and enforcement action. And so out of this, starting fiscal year 2021 and going through the various, the balance of the financial plan, there are a number of those initiatives that spur from that. And first of all, we have we're going to be auditing online delivery companies, which is sort of a new entity that that has sprung up. It's been there for years, but it has become more lucrative during the pandemic. So we will have an initiative that ensure that these third-party facilitators are collecting and remitting the sales tax in accordance with our statute. We're also on a campaign, again, using the data that we have to conduct a thorough review of the gross receipts tax returns to ensure that they are proper compliance. We're also making sure that we're enhancing our audit of sales and withholding to make sure that taxpayer taxes that are withheld on behalf of the district from consumers and from employees, that companies are not holding on to them longer than is needed. And then we're also implementing a program that will expand the garnishment of taxes for unpaid taxes. And then we're also a third initiative, I guess a fifth initiative here is one where we're going to look at high income taxpayers and to ensure that those taxpayers are remitting the required revenue according to our statute. Overall, these initiatives will generate about $12.5 million in revenue in 2021, and then an additional over 10 million in 2022. And as we ramp up these initiatives, the amount that we get for the balance, it goes down to 8 million and then about 5 million by the end of the financial plan years.
Okay.
So Keith, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but these are some of the compliance initiatives.
Okay.
No, sir, you knocked it out the box with that one. Nothing to add.
Talk about y'all's role in this budget proposal for $9.5 million to track and evaluate the stimulus funds received by the city.
Right. So, the bulk of that would be, I guess, Eric. Eric, you can just talk about what we're going to be using the FTEs for.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman. Eric Kennedy, Deputy CFO for the Office of Budget and Planning. So currently, we assist the executives team with entering data into the portal to report out to Treasury. And we have developed multiple reports to capture the expenditures. And that's actually said prior to receiving this second tranche of money. In order to be able to report out and track and come up with reporting systems and review of the expenditures and things of that nature, our capacity has to increase. Our human resource capacity has to increase because we don't have a number of people to do what needs to be done. As you can imagine, we've not seen this level of revenue influx in a very long time. And I think no one actually had the capacity to manage it. And so our goal is to ramp it up so that we can, one, ensure that we don't, to the extent possible, we work with the program staff to help them by just handling all of the fiscal tracking, all the fiscal management, and so they can focus on allowability and things of that nature.
Are those FTEs? Are they contractors? Are they
so these will be
systems?
temporary FTEs.
Okay.
They will be temporary FTEs. They'll go through FY24, but they're renewable each year.
Okay, and they're in FY21 as well as
21.
Got it.
In order, the next reporting period, which I believe, we hope to have these FTEs on board for the next reporting period. But I think that depends on the outcome of this budget process. And if we can, then we can reduce the very, very heavy lift that's being, right now, I think the people who are actually handling most of the reporting, there's probably 2 or 3 people doing that. And that's for the entire city. So we absolutely have to increase our capacity.
How many FTEs do you anticipate having?
So in my Office of Budget and Planning, I will need 4 of those FTEs, and in Treasury, they will need 1 additional. So that's 5 FTEs that we need.
Okay, and so the 9.5 is over the course of how many? How is it stretched out? Is that? If you could just break down that 9.5.
9.5 million.
This is yeah. If staff could let me know the reference to where this is.
Yeah, that's not those FTEs. I think that's more than that. Yeah, that's more than that. But because we're adding roughly 300 and some odd thousand to AT0's budget in 22, and that will recur through 24. So the 9.5 million is not for those FTEs.
Yeah, we have 364,000. Yeah, it's 364,000 for those 5 FTEs.
Okay, all right. I'm going to revisit this. I'm going to wait to hear back from the staff, and I'll revisit that because, yeah, I have a different, much higher number. But let me just ask generally, are there any other activities that you all are working on associated with evaluating the federal funds that would bring the number closer to 9.5 million?
You know, the 364,000 I know is the budget request in there for those 5 FTEs for fiscal year 2022. But even if we run that through the financial plan, it would not come to 9.5 million. So I can't. Yeah, I don't know where the how that fits in.
I'll circle back with that one. I want to just sort of hone in on this a bit. I know you touched on it, but I want to make sure the record is clear. The capital budget for the agency is 133% over the FY21 budget. So if you could break down the primary drivers of that significant increase.
I'll turn again to Eric Kennedy, our budget director, to talk about the capital budget. You can take this, Paul.
Well, I can start off by saying that the biggest driver is our DIFS project, the District Integrated Financial System. Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, an ongoing project. We're not quite at the halfway point, even in our spending of the funds. It's our largest capital project. And so that's the vast majority of our capital funds go toward the District Integrated Financial System, DIFS.
Okay. And I have some questions toward the end about that system, and I'm gonna reserve those questions till I get there. And there's a number of FTEs as well on the capital side?
Yes, I think we have 34 full-time FTEs assigned to the DIPS project.
Okay, got it. Okay, I see a number of 38. I don't know if they're all, the other four are somewhere else.
Yes, I'm sorry, maybe that's increasing for next year. We'll
Yeah.
give you the current total, right? But the primary goal that's assigning OCFO resources to the DIPS project to make sure we have sufficient staff input into the project as we go through this major overhaul of our financial system.
Okay. So let me go back to that prior question when I mentioned 9.5 million. It turns out that it is something referenced in the executive summary of the budget, but it's not just for your agency. It goes across a number of agencies, but it says it's $9.5 million to enhance oversight, accountability, tracking, evaluation, and monitoring and processing of the district's $3.4 billion in stimulus funds through the Office of the Inspector General, Office of the Chief Financial Officer, Office of the City Administrator, Office of Contract and Procurement, and Office of the Chief Technology Officer. So
Okay, that makes sense. So it's across the entire district, not just the OCFO.
okay, but there are various agencies are doing similar things, or various agencies doing different things? Do you know whether, and I guess I don't necessarily expect you to know every single detail of all these other agencies, but generally speaking, with the amount of that size, I imagine there's some level of coordination occurring with respect to this activity?
Chairman, this is Eric Kennedy again. My understanding is that each office obviously is unique and those are different things.
Okay.
The coordination that you're referring to is likely to occur at the executive level in the office of the mayor. They will handle the coordination. Our role is specifically to handle the fiscal reporting component of this, but there are other enhancements happening in those different agencies that are outside of that fiscal reporting component.
Okay.
And I actually talked to the mayor's budget director, I think about this like a week ago or so. And so again, they're handling the coordination of those programmatic enhancements outside that don't fall within the purview of the OCFO.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. I'm going to sort of stay on those federal funds for just a moment. What's the total amount of American Rescue Plan Act funds that you all have in your 21 and 22 budget?
Eric, I know in my testimony, we talk about 400 and I think it was, let me go back. 364,000 that we talk about for the 5 FTEs.
Okay.
But I don't know, is Eric, you can confirm that that's all we have, right?
Sorry, I was trying to turn my mute off. Yeah, the 360,000 is what we have in our budget in 22. And again, that recurs through 24. So that's all that I'm aware of.
Okay. And that begins in 22.
It starts in 20. Well, it's prorated in 21.
Okay.
So it's not the 364, but for the purpose of what you're probably looking at in the budget book, 364 recurs through 24, but it's been prorated in 21 starting in July. Again, depending on the outcome of the budget process.
Okay. And just in terms of the amount of federal funds that we're receiving is just, I imagine, unprecedented amount in the American Rescue Plan Act. And are you all seeing, besides the FTEs that you have to bring on, any other challenges that you all have encountered with respect to receipt and just getting that money in and where it needs to be?
Well, the good news is we got an early start last year when we started getting the CARES Act money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did a very good job of putting the reporting and tracking infrastructure in place. And during our CAFRA audit, I actually, for the first time, worked with the auditors from the budget perspective. And they talked about how we were ahead of the curve compared to other states, in that we prepared for this in advance enough so that we didn't have any issues. Now, with this new tranche of money, it's about capacity. So we have an infrastructure, but do we have the human capital resources to manage this increased capacity of money? And so right now, that is a challenge for us. And the reason why we desperately need to get these FTEs in place.
I don't have my chart in front of me, but there are different buckets that the money comes in, and at different times in which some of the funds have to be spent. Some of it I've seen in certain agencies, portions are sort of in as local funds because they come in under the state and local. Then other portions are in as sort of federal. Who determines, I mean, obviously the feds send it to us in a certain way, but like, who determines within the district government how particular federal funds are going to be, I don't know if this is the right phrases, so just correct me if there aren't, coded and then loaded into the system?
So I can answer part of that question. I can say that for the funds that you're not seeing identified as local replacement funds, all of these funds come into the district as federal funds.
Okay.
And then there's some funding that you're seeing in the budget. It's saying local replacement funding. That came as federal, and then it was transferred into local. And that was based on some accounting guidelines and I can't really speak to, someone here can speak to that, but all of the funds came to the district as federal money, but that portion of local replacement money for accounting reasons was transferred into local. Everything else is categorized as federal dollars.
So the way that the systems work, then, if it's categorized as local, it should be reflected that way in every single agency. So long as it's from the same pot, it should be reflected that way in every agency that gets a portion of that funding.
And we did. That's correct. So again, so we were ahead of the curve, working with the mayor's office, in that we were able to get an infrastructure in place so that we could categorize these monies in the appropriate buckets. Again, what we're working through now is the capacity, because we're getting this money and it just seems, it's a lot of money, obviously. Okay. And so, but we do have an infrastructure in place that allows us to categorize this funding correctly. And so in every single agency where they have, for example, local replacement money, and I don't want to get too technical, but it'll be recorded in a specific fund detail, an accounting attribute and budget attribute, so that we can tease that out and provide for your budget office and any other council member or committee reports. They show that money is budgeted and where and how that money, well, not necessarily how, but how much of that money is being spent.
Okay, okay. This is sort of a long lead up to a question, but I'm gonna ask this. It might still be relevant to Mr. Kennedy. I'm not sure. But one of the office's functions is to help the Office of Budget and Planning staff and other district personnel develop their budgets. As part of that assistance, OCFO helps agencies and staff run cost analysis and budget performance reviews, so their budgets reflect actual needs. At the recent performance oversight hearing, Deputy CFO of OBP noted that his office helped the executive and his representative AFOs process 193 operating and capital reprogramming requests, in addition to 663 grant budget modifications in FY20. And I think about 240 of those grant budget modifications required council approval. Has the office seen an increase in reprogramming and grant modification requests district-wide?
I would say that in terms of budget modifications or grant modifications, absolutely the uptick. It's as we begin to get more of these COVID funds in the way of grants, we're going to see a dramatic uptick in grant mod and requests. And we've changed our process, and actually your budget office helped us realize that there was a better way to inform the council when we were getting COVID money. And so my performance hearing, we made a decision to change how we report to the council, or we segregate out the COVID funds so you could see those separate from the funding that's not COVID related. And so you're going to see a dramatic uptick.
Okay, and the spending pressure task force, what's the role of the spending pressure task force?
So the spending pressure task force role is to bring together all of the, well, not all, but a fairly large body of OCFO employees, AFOs, things like that, and the executive, the mayor's team of people to identify spending pressures in the that are identified in the FRP, or spending pressures that we think might come around, but they haven't reported out in the FRP, and to come up with strategies to close those spending pressures. This task force, we have seen a great deal of improvement in the way that we manage spending pressures. Instead of sort of getting a spending pressure and then saying, okay, now tell us how you're going to close it. We do it together. We work with the executive office to come up with strategies to close those spending pressures. And for those spending pressures that are brewing, we track them and we collectively communicate what's going on with respect to changes to that spending pressure. So at any given time, for the most part, we know whether it's during an FRP period or not, we have a good idea of what's going on with respect to spending pressures.
Okay. I'm going to shift to talk a little bit about revenue projections. The office is responsible for forecasting revenue for the district government on a quarterly basis, and generally the office issues the official revenue estimate and around this time in February of each year. And that's used to develop the next fiscal year's budget. This year, the office provided a revised revenue estimate in May, prior to the mayor's submission of the proposed FY22 budget to the council. Talk about why you all did that in May of this year.
Right. So, thanks for that question, because what usually happens is that the timetable that we set for the budget, we do one in February prior, because in normal years, the mayor would submit the budget sometime in March, and that's to inform the budget. And just to keep in mind that what we're trying to do with the revenue forecast each time is to provide all that we know in terms of where we think the revenue is going to be, with all the information that we have at that point in time. And of course, part of it is informed by the budget timetable. This year, as you know, because of the ARPA funds and the mayor's people waiting for the guideline, that had to be pushed back into May. When we put out the June estimates in the normal course of a year, it's because we know what the income tax is. So when we do it in February, generally all we know at that point is the real property tax, which constitutes a big part of our revenue structure. The next part, of the second highest contributor to our revenue, is the income tax. So we put out the June because by that time we have the April filings, again in a normal year. So this year, because the budget was delayed, we had the opportunity to start observing the income tax revenue that was coming in. And we wanted to make sure that the budget that was being developed had all the information that we knew at the time. And so given that it was, and as you saw from that revenue estimate, it was a substantial increase in the revenue compared to what we were in February, because income taxes from individuals and business were just off the charts this year. And so this is the reason we decided to do it on May 14th, so that the budget could be fully informed by what we knew.
Okay, and I guess that would be, that explanation could also be used, because I think some people have posited that the revenue estimates in the past have been too conservative, and that they have underestimated vast sums that would have otherwise been available to the district. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that, but perhaps you've already done that in your prior response.
Yeah. And, just in terms of that, so as I mentioned, part of this is the budget timetable. We have to give a revenue forecast for the mayor's budget, which usually happens in March. Ideally, you're right, we would like to give it later, because we know one of the, I said the second largest component of our revenue are the income taxes. And the income taxes also happen to be one of the more volatile components of our revenue, because it depends a lot on capital gains and profits from companies. And those fluctuate really wildly. And, we'll be the first to admit, but, not the only one. All across the states, when we meet with other people from other jurisdictions, those are the elements. And we usually talk about April surprise, because usually, especially in a really, really good year, the capital gains realization are really high. And that is responsible in some years for the reason why the revenues tend to grow much larger than we had anticipated. So as you suggested, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the reasons people usually say we underestimate, because we don't have the opportunity to have that information be a part of the budget, just because of the timetable for the budget process.
And not directly related, but I think tangentially on this topic, you've got we had some folks who testified, public witnesses, a couple of weeks ago, and it comes up on occasion in my interactions as chair. Obviously, your office is not a policy-making body, right? And you've said that before, and I've heard it from previous CFOs. But there have been some conversations or critiques about whether there's a need of the office to better engage, residents, different communities, to understand the city's social climate or any trends related to that in order to equip the office to advise the mayor and council on finances. I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you'd like, to respond to that, because it also comes up sometimes in your the fiscal impact statements that you all provide. I'm not sure if you heard some of the testimony that we have from some of the public witnesses who raised concerns about the office's FIS and what is used to do the FIS versus some of the things that are not factored in.
So thank you for that question and the opportunity to respond to that. So first of all, let me say that we do have a lot of engagement with the community. We talk to business people. We talk to a lot of the advocates from various parts of the district. And we also do ongoing research into some of these issues. So if you go to our website, there are a lot of publications we have done around the earned income tax credit, for example, looking at analysis of minimum wage and a lot of these things that we think are social issues. But as you said, we're not policymakers, but we do the policy analysis. So that advocates and policymakers can have this information when they when they're deliberating policy and when they're about to make policy. So we do I think have that engagement, and we can always improve our standing our operations in that regard to just keep engaging people. On the fiscal impact statements, whenever you do the fiscal impact statements, there are pieces of information that we know for sure because they're out there. And there are always some component of that estimation that we have to make assumptions. And our assumptions are usually informed by what we've seen in the past. Sometimes it's our best guess about what we think will happen. And they're always going to have people who have different perspective on what should go into those assumptions, and sometimes even frankly the data. Some people will disagree with the data that we use. So we recognize these disagreements, and again, a lot of time when we're doing this fiscal impact statement and we're challenged, we're willing to sit down with the parties and discuss the difference in the assumption and why we're making these assumptions and why we believe these assumptions are reasonable. And frankly, sometimes people bring perspective that we do incorporate when we do these fiscal impact statements. So I say, there are times when we're just going to disagree with other people's assessment in terms of, why we end up where we ended up with a fiscal impact statement. But we are always open. I mean, we know that we don't know everything in regards, especially in some of these more specialized areas. And so we're always willing to listen to other people's perspective.
Okay. Something else that's been coming to the attention of the committee more recently, and there's been a couple of bills introduced around it, is clean hands. And during a performance oversight, the committee received feedback from residents and small business owners about challenges obtaining clean hands certifications, particularly during the pandemic, which they need to access grant funds that were available and other support for their businesses during the public health emergency. When we've talked about this, your team mentions that residents and business owners can enter into payment plans and obtain the clean hands certifications. Now, I appreciate that, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I want to come back to it now.
Right.
But we continue to hear from constituents that they don't know about the payment plans and the time that they may have to be able to delay it, paying a clean hands or whatever they owe. So, and you mentioned earlier in response to that, my initial question around racial equity, it was like a self-service payment plans.
Right.
So talk about how residents can access information about these payment plans and describe perhaps a process for them to be able to enter into a payment plan.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. And what I want to say, but I'll turn to Keith Richardson, the tax administrator, to go into the details. But as you correctly pointed out, that I did respond to some of. So as we've just put in place this integrated tax system, and part of that has helped us to build, especially during the COVID pandemic, to have system that allows the kind of flexibility in the payment plan. And part of that, of course, is that we have to continue to engage the community and taxpayers to inform them of that. But specifically turning to the website and how people can access that, I'll turn to Keith Richardson, the tax administrator. Keith?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lee. In reference to your question, Councilmember McDuffie, again, all taxpayers, all residents, business owners in the district can go to the mytax.dc.gov portal to go in to make quick payments, or to go in also to establish their account and to set up payment plan options and opportunities. We allow them to go in for the first time to make a payment plan, set up a payment plan for 24 months, 30 months, whatever may fit their financial situation right now, in order to get their clean hand certificate. Again, we also would like and encourage taxpayers to call us in reference to setting up some payment plans that they aren't capable to go through the website and set that up as well. Again, we're willing to work with them, and we recognize with the pandemic, again, circumstances uncontrollable by them, that they need to try to make some arrangements with us. And again, we're always willing to do that. We're willing to work with the business owners right now. As we know, they're looking for future grants with the district as well. We want to be creative to help them out to be able to secure those grants and make payments as they get their businesses up and running again as well. So the site is available. We've been out in the communities, even during tax season, to talk to people about how to access the website, how to call us, to set up payment plans as well. So we will continue to do that in the foreseeable future as well.
What's the timeline like, generally speaking, if I owe money and want to set up a payment plan and I go online, but I'm also desperately seeking some grant that the district currently has out. How long might it take on average for a person to seek to enter into a payment plan, get approved for it, and then be able to secure perhaps a grant if they're eligible?
Well, one, if you go online, it's pretty easy and efficient that you can do it. And once you've put your information, all the necessary information we need, besides your banking information for ACH payments, it won't take long at all. I would suggest that any taxpayer who's looking to secure grants with the district right now, that they call us. Call us at customer service, or again, call the collections and enforcement area that directly deal with the clean hand certificates. That way someone can be on the call with them from our collections group to walk them through the process with them to set up the payment plans as well, and at the same time get their clean hand certificate.
Okay.
So Keith, once they set up the payment plan and it's all approved, that they will have access, it will clear the clean hands. I think that's what
they can go to the clean hand certificate again on our website and get it right there on the spot from the website.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think it's subtitle 2N of the mayor's budget, the BSA specifically proposes to do a number of things to support economic recovery in the district, including authorizing the mayor to implement a fee forgiveness program for corporate entity filing requirements. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but and I'm curious about whether this includes fees that would prevent an entity from obtaining clean hand certificate.
I am not familiar with the provision. I don't know if anybody on my team is. Keith, do you know about this provision?
I know. I think it largely deals with DCRA.
Okay.
But I was curious as whether or not there's any aspect of it that might include some fees or outstanding payments that are owed that prevents businesses from getting clean hands.
Chairman McDuffie, we were not aware that it included tax liabilities.
Okay. I probably should have asked this a little earlier when we were talking about the budget timeline and some of the things that you all were responding to some of the critiques of witnesses and others. But I'll ask it now. You all participated in the committee's recent tax policy hearing, and we have gotten a lot of positive feedback from people about that discussion. So thank you for your participation. One of the things highlighted in the hearing was this conversation about taxing wealth that came up. And I know that many district residents file tax returns, obviously, which allows your office to track data based on income. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Does your office have the ability to track and gauge household wealth?
I mean, we can only do that at the aggregate level, but our tax information, as you mentioned, is primarily income. And as you recall, one of the initiatives that compliance initiatives is to look at high income tax returns in terms of the criteria for identifying ones that might be escaping our tax net. But we don't have the ability to get that individual one.
Okay. I see some of these stats that have been done in various reports. I think there's one by the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. Actually, they may have been referencing a Urban Institute report that talks about household. The average white family household wealth is 81 times the net household wealth of Black families in the District of Columbia. Have you heard that statistic before?
Not that specific one, but although estimates puts it around those. I mean, those are the kind of numbers you'll see. I mean, not just in the district, but nationwide. I haven't seen the specific one you're referring to, but
you all don't.
That sounds about right.
Any of the tools that you all have at your disposal currently, I know you do a number of reports. You talked about some of it earlier, and I appreciate them and have read them.
Right.
A lot of good stuff that you all are producing that perhaps some people don't even know that you're producing and publishing on your website. Right. But do you have any of the tools that might produce that type of data around wealth?
You know, a lot of that would be information available from a lot of the federal database, and if we were required, we could look around and find that specifically for the district. As of now, I frankly I don't know in terms of wealth data, but I'm pretty sure if we look around, we could find the data. And just coming back, I mean, we didn't mention this in overall, but in terms of the accessibility of the reports, one of the things we're doing is revamping the portion of the website where we put up these reports so that it's more accessible to people and more user friendly, so people will be able to see these reports more easily.
Okay. All right. You talked about in your presentation and even afterwards, come up a couple of times about the My Tax system, the new system that you all have implemented. And we've filled it at the committee a number of inquiries about the system. And frankly, some criticism of the system. Some residents believe the system is less useful than it was prior to the upgrade. They talk about the information that is available in the new system and how in some instances they feel like it's less information that was previously available in the other system. And I think property's historical tax history is one of the areas that they mentioned. Have you all determined whether you're going to go back to providing 10 years of historical tax data on the platform rather than what I think is 3 years worth of data now available?
To answer your
So,
question.
and I'll go ahead, Keith. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Again, when we implemented the system back in December of 2020, made the determination we couldn't upload all the data from prior years. That's why we want the 3 years data of information. If there are folks that do need some property information, there is a way to access that information. Again, right now, we're still trying to make a determination if we're going to upload that with more information. We're trying to continue with making sure the system is stabilized right now before we move in that direction.
Okay, there's apparently a timeout function that some people have also inquired about. Is that something that is going to remain, or is there some sort of tweaks you might be able to make to address or disable, in fact, the fact that the site times out after a certain amount of time?
When you're saying timeout, is that when people are trying to get in the system with access with their username and password? I don't know what they mean by that.
Maybe we can follow up because I don't have any specifics beyond that. Apparently, after a certain amount of time.
And one thing I'll add, Chairman. So, we're moving to a new platform, and part of this is moving it to the cloud. So, as Keith says, we had to make a decision about how many years, because the more you add, the more it could affect performance. But as we see how the system performs as we move to the cloud, we will decide how much more years of data we can add. But for now, they have it might be a little cumbersome, but people who want data going back can make a request to OTR, and we can provide that to them.
Anything jumps out at you in terms of like improvements that you plan to make or modifications that are in the works for the system?
So as Keith said, we're in the post-implementation phase now, and
right.
We have gotten the feedback from people, and we're working on improving the systems, and both in terms of performance and functionality. And Keith, you wanted to add more to that?
Yeah, the system gets quarterly updates with our vendor as we continue to move forward with the system. And one thing we're looking at right now is just making some changes to the My Tax portal to make sure some things are more upfront for taxpayers to see as well. So, but we continue to update the system quarterly.
Okay. I
mentioned the Center of Excellence earlier, and part of that Center of Excellence is to do just that. As we receive feedback on the system, they will continue to make sure that we're upgraded so it meets the needs of the 21st century and the changing needs of the taxpayers. And so that's part of the building of the Center of Excellence.
Okay. I recently introduced legislation, which I alluded to earlier. Actually, I didn't allude to earlier, but I've had a number of conversations about it, and we had it on the agenda for the council's meeting on Tuesday to cancel this year's real property tax sale for residential and commercial properties. And to form my decision, your office provided the number and types of properties eligible for tax sale, and whether the relevant property owners also owned income taxes. Are the various systems that deal with income tax, real property tax, clean hands, et cetera, synced, so to speak? Do they talk to one another or does your office have to run different queries across multiple internal platforms?
Thank you.
And I'll turn to Keith, but part of the putting in this new system is to allow those kind of integrations. But Keith, you can talk about specifically Clean Hands and the others.
So in reference to your question, the system is fully integrated. So when people in the Office of Tax and Revenue are looking up information, for example, your real property, at the same time, we can look up your individual income tax issues and if you have a business as well. So it's fully integrated.
Okay. And I believe my staff provided your office a series of questions on the DFIFS ahead of the hearing. And so my plan is not to go through all those right now, but could you provide a little bit more of an update on that system, where things stand? What specifically is a useful life? Maybe we can begin there. What is the useful life of this project system?
So, I mean, let me start by saying, in the presentation, I made reference to this, that, first of all, we're the current financial system that we have was written in COBOL and as, really in these days, ancient technology. So part of the goal was to replace that system with, modern, a database system that, is used throughout the United States, both in government and in business. In terms of the useful life of the system, it's really hard to determine these days because the technology changes so fast. But what we're making sure that we do is that as of now, we're using, the best technology that is available. It's cloud-based and using the Oracle database, which is the industry standard for these kind of systems. And so, it's really, really difficult these days because, as you know, from our consumer telephones, these technology moves very, very fast. But we're hoping to make sure that this is a system that when we put it on will last for a number of years.
And I appreciate that it is, you mentioned it uses Oracle, and it's sort of state of the art. And I believe you even mentioned in your presentation, perhaps, that the district would be the first municipality in the country to roll out such program. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, my screen timed out for a minute there. So could you repeat the question, Chairman?
Yeah, I was wondering why you disappeared and you popped up again.
Yeah, it just disconnected.
No, I was just talking about the fact that in referencing the system, you talked about how it might even be the first. We might be the first municipality in the country to roll out this type of a program. And I referenced that. That
was in relation to the tax system. So the tax system, we're the first to integrate. You asked earlier about integration. We're the first to integrate all the tax system in all the taxes under one system. Okay. So that's the one I was referring to. But what I'll say, and I mentioned this as one of the benefits of the district integrated financial system is that when we put that in, because it's state of the art, what we'll be able to is to interface not only with our tax system, but in the agencies with various other systems that we have to work with. That is kind of one of the goals. And it might not happen on day one of implementation, but putting in the system allow us to do that over time.
So is the DIFS though, is it something that is used widely around the country? Is there a way to really compare, project cost or some sort of timeline around this system? Some sort of reference point, I think, is kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yes, there are various state and local government that are putting in the system. And just here in this area, I know the DC Water is putting in a similar system. Montgomery County Public Schools are, I think they've just put in system, and I can't remember all of it, but I think there are various state and local governments. So as I said earlier, this is something that many other businesses outside government has implemented. I mean, it is the state of the art and the standard, but many state and local government, as they're moving to a new system, this is the system. And yes, there are. I don't know if it would be comparable to the district, because as you know, the thing that makes the district unique is that, you know, we're a state, local, county, school system all together. So I mentioned Montgomery County Public Schools. It would be a system just for their schools. We would be rolling out a system that covers various levels of government. And so as with a lot of things, it's really hard to make the comparison with other state and local government, just because of the unique nature of the district fiscal system.
What's the budget for it currently?
I think we're 205 million is the budget. And I said they've cut 26 million out of it for now. But this is the amount that we would need going forward, because the first phase, we're rolling it out in first phase. And so the first phase is the financial and the accounting system and the budget execution piece. But as we get into the following piece, an important part of it is the budget formulation piece. And that's where the budget cut would affect us, or affect us on our ability to implement.
You noted in your presentation that the council removed 26 million in FY21. Was it restored in the mayor's proposed budget?
No, it has not been restored. And as of now, it doesn't implement the our, you know, what we're calling the go live for next October. But for the next phase of the system, it would have a serious impact, or seriously impact our ability to implement the budget formulation. But it has not been restored as yet.
Got it. Just to be clear, did you all request restoration of that for your proposal?
We did have discussion with the mayor's team when we were formed. Angel, can you? I mean, I didn't have direct. Did we have that discussion with them?
Yes. Good afternoon, Councilmember McDuffie. We did, and we did request that it be put in the budget, but because we don't actually need the use of the funds until fiscal year 2023, it is still our hope that we will receive those funds in time for us to implement the budget formulation module timely.
Okay. So beyond the 26 million that you already referenced that you'll need in 2023, is there any, I mean, will you need any additional funds with respect to supporting any updates for this system, DIFS?
As long as we get that money back, we should have sufficient funding.
Okay. I think, Dr. Lee, you may have also mentioned creating a central grants management system. What's that system going to be used for, or what's the need for that?
I'm trying to see where we may.
I can speak to that if it's right. So
go ahead.
I think that when we were originally contemplating this was going to be one of the modules. However, it's not in our current implementation plan. It would be something that perhaps we would contemplate in one of the future phases of the project.
Okay. I think I've reached the end of the questions I plan to ask at the moment. Is there anything else that any of you all would like to add to the record before we close out?
No, anybody have any other thing we'd like to say? I think that's it for me.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate each of you for providing testimony to the committee today. I also appreciate earlier the testimony provided by the Office of Lottery and Gaming. This marks the end of today's budget oversight hearing. The committee will reconvene on Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021 at 9 a.m. for a budget oversight hearing on Events DC, Destination DC, and the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. The time is now 12:33 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all, and thank you to
Okay,
staff
thank you.
for support.